want to bring in my next guest who knows a lot of things actually, about what China is capable of, former Canadian ambassador to that country, Guy Saint-Jacques. Mr. Saint-Jacques, good to see you again. Thanks for making the time.
Good to see you, Vassy.
Is there any world in which you can imagine, people in the Prime Minister's office would not be aware of the potential actions China would take, or the potential meddling China would be interested in when it comes to our elections?
Well, I'm quite surprised by some of the comments that have been made at the Commission today, because we have to go back to the context that existed in 2019 at the time of the elections. We were in the middle of a full crisis with China after the arrest of Wang Wangzhou and the two Michaels in December 2018. This was followed by retaliatory measures by China. We lost $4.5 billion in exports in the following year in 2019. Apart from the case of the two Michaels, they had given a death sentence to Mr. Schellenberg. And if I had been a high official or working in a cabinet, all my antenna would have been out to know what else China was up to, especially because, as we have heard, and I was at the embassy in 2015 before the elections, and we knew that China was interfering. I was aware of activities that involve members of the Chinese consulate in Toronto approaching some provincial MPs in Ontario, and also all kinds of other activities. So for all those reasons, because the bad status of the relationship, everybody should have been on the lookout. And I find incredible that CSIS was doing its utmost to sensitize senior officials and government official ministers to the dangers that, they kept sending intelligence up. They organized 34 briefing sessions. And, in my view, I was also listening to what Mrs. Drouin was saying about the work of that critical group. And I would question the decision-making process and even the judgment of the people, because, what threshold would have been required for them to inform the public when she said that they didn't want to create confusion, they didn't want to look partisan? Well, what would have been required for them? And from my point of view, I know that there was a lot of disinformation that was that was made on WeChat. It's a social media that is used widely by Canadians of Chinese origin. And another thing that I found very surprising is when David Morrison, who at the time was the acting national security advisor, said that it was up to Mr. Chiu to defend himself and to show that this was false information. Well, why in that case did someone in PCO contact Facebook to ask them to remove information related to Mr. Trudeau? So it doesn't seem that there was a good judgment exercise. I think that, unfortunately, the members of this committee, which, by the way, I think was functioning on a consensus basis, that means you needed unanimity to make a decision to inform the public. I think, I would put this in the category of missed opportunities.
I was going to ask you if it seems, the second half of this is going to provide recommendations for future elections. But does it seem inevitable to you that there needs to be put in place an additional mechanism or a different form of oversight in order to determine what the public knows, what the people at the heart of the interference actually find out? Because what has become apparent is that mechanism you're referencing, that side committee, basically didn't tell anybody who was part of the last election that they were either being targeted or even just through the political parties, like that these efforts were underway. Because as you mentioned, they felt it didn't meet a certain threshold. But even the then Public Safety Minister Bill Blair told me last night, he kind of wishes he had known that stuff back then.
Well, I'm also very surprised by what Mr. Blair said, because, they had said previously that they didn't have the technical equipment to receive classified notes from CSIS. Well, I know full well that if you don't have the equipment, there's someone who comes with a suitcase with 2 keys and will show you the information. And again, because of all the status of our relationship with China, I think everyone should have been on high alert. So I think what will be required is to better define the threshold to decide when it's time to inform the public and to counter the disinformation. And we have not seen the end. China will continue to use this. I was also listening to what Brian Clough was saying earlier, that in fact he didn't see any proof that the disinformation was coming from China. Well, does he expect to see fingerprints? We are dealing with a very sophisticated government that is a master in the art of disinformation. We know that WeChat is used by more than 1 million Canadians of Chinese origin. And in fact, we have to protect Canadians of Chinese origin as we have to protect all Canadians from harassment, intimidation, and threat by the Chinese government. And, if you believe in democracy, you have to be clear that the criteria, the standards apply to everyone. Another example of this that I find incredible is that the Liberal Party allows anyone to vote at the convention. You don't need to be a Canadian citizen. And there was, as far as I know, nobody checking whether the students that came to vote at in fact, on behalf of the yes. Chinese Congress, and nobody asked them for a proof of a resident. I think the Liberal Party needs to change its rule to ensure that democracy is protected.
Lots of fodder, I imagine, for the questioning of the Prime Minister tomorrow at the inquiry. Mr. Saint-Jacques, thank you for your analysis this evening. I appreciate it as always.
Thank you.